Hello friends, welcome back to Arsa Medica. Today I am going to be talking about Oppenheimer. I am going to be talking about the astrological profile of J Robert Oppenheimer. Okay, so the person, the name, the phenomenon needs no introduction at all. From the social perspective, what I'm intending to do is today is to have a very detailed astrological exploration of this person. Okay, so I will start immediately by sharing the screens. So welcome to this lecture, and my name is Dr. Rahul Kamath, and it's great to be back here after a hiatus. And actually, I saw Oppenheimer the movie 2 times, and I also have a theoretical physicist in the family, so it's fascinating really to be able to study astrological profile of Oppenheimer and present my findings to you. So here goes without further ado. Our customary salutations to the Holy Trinity. That word Trinity here becomes very significant. The pun is intended actually from the divine sense. It is unintended by me. Okay, so the trial of the Manhattan Project, the final trial was called the Trinity, right? And salutations to the divine light, that is Jyotish. Now, basically, when we study Oppenheimer, we should try to be clear about what are we looking really for. So this person is a world famous theoretical physicist, or was a world famous theoretical physicist. So we are looking at the invisible world of atoms, nuclear energy. Ketu becomes therefore significant for us. Ketu also stands for hidden power. We know that Ketu is exalted in Sagittarius, 9th house in the Kalapurush Kundali. So therefore, the kind of dharmic fame that it entails. Ketu, as Dhwaja, as a flag. So therefore, Ketu becomes very significant to the domain of physics of nuclear energy, because it is essentially invisible. It becomes germane to the fame that Oppenheimer got as a result of his work, and it has to be essentially connected with his work domain. So we will look at Ketu today in great detail. Jupiter and Venus both are extremely common combination in many physicists. You will find opposition, you will find conjunction, we will find very peculiar and very specific and brilliant combinations of Jupiter and Venus in his chart. We are going to be looking for it, of course. And the interesting thing is that from a Vedic perspective, Jupiter is Guru, and gravity is called Gurutva Karshan in Sanskrit. So it is the ability of a heavenly body or a celestial mass to exert attraction, or let's say on another celestial mass, what is called gravity, essentially is what Oppenheimer studied, because he postulated the existence of black holes, which actually were discovered much later, right? And so essentially Guru has to be looked at, and Venus certainly, because these are the greater and the lesser benefics. Anything of the nature of an atomic bomb, anything of the nature of enormous import for humanity, has to have association, or should I say sort of correlation with Jupiter and Venus. Venus here being the overlord. Venus is, of course, Shukracharya. He is the overlord of all the occult and the miraculous sciences or arts. What they did actually was nothing short of miraculous for that time. For 1942, 1941, when the Manhattan Project actually started getting in full steam, this was very significant. So we are going to be looking at Jupiter and Venus. Mercury, of course, is important because Mercury stands for analytical knowledge. Mercury stands for obviously a research orientation. And we see here that Mercury is extremely well represented in Oppenheimer's chart. Mercury is the rational scientific approach, which is ideally devoid of emotional thinking. And with emotional thinking, when we talk of emotions, we talk of feeling, we talk of suffering. We are of course referring to the moon. The moon also plays an important role in his chart, as we will see. Uh, Oppenheimer was always in the middle of a conflict between his suffering mind and his rational mind. At one level, he was very afraid of what he was working on in terms of the impact on humanity. On the other hand, he had already made up his mind, and he was sort of already scientifically engaged in developing the bomb. So in this case, moon stands for sensitivity, poise, uh, verbal and behavioral etiquette. So we find in the movie, for example, when Oppenheimer is subjected to a lot of difficult questioning, that he retains his poise. He may be seething sometimes with anger or with dejection, but he retains his poise. So he's always been very sophisticated. So we can see that from his moon in the chart. Much more of that later. Uh, of course, we need to look at the sun, because sun as the Naisargik Karaka of leadership, of worldwide fame. We always find very powerful positions of sun in the charts of of kings or autocrats, or for that matter, great healers also, for example, or leaders of society. So we'll look at that. Now, what Oppenheimer really represented is, apart from his personal, his personal journey and his narrative, as somebody who actually developed the bomb and was testament, or was witness to its deployment. But this is also a matter of mundane astrology. This concerns society at large. It concerns humanity at large. So therefore, we have to look at the outer planets. We need to look at Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, and we'll find very interesting findings. And the reason I have this slide in advance of seeing the Kundali or seeing the horoscope is that if we know what are we looking for, we have our prior knowledge already activated, and therefore we can then see things pretty quickly. So with this, now I am sharing you the Kundali, and we can now deep dive here, right? So you can see the chart now here in front of you. This is J Robert Oppenheimer. He was born on the 22nd of April 1904 at 8:15 a.m. in New York City, New York State, USA. Now this is based on records which are available on the internet. Okay, so my source is the internet. All right. Now let's start analyzing his chart from the perspective of what we are looking for. The whole idea is not to do a detailed analysis of his horoscope, but to look at him from the perspective of being a theoretical physicist and what he represented. So quickly, we see the ascendant is Gemini. Now we see Gulika and Neptune in the ascendant. Okay, but we'll come to that a little later. The lord of ascendant is Mercury. Mercury happens to be in the last Navamaush of Aries in the 11th house, right? So Mercury is in Aries in Sagittarius Navamaush. So if you see the D9 chart here, you will realize that Mercury is in Sagittarius here with Venus. Okay, now so if you see Mercury, now Mercury's nakshatra dispositor is Sun, because Mercury is in Kritika, and Kritika, the planetary lord, is Sun. So if you see Sun is exalted here. Sun is exalted in Aries in the 11th house. So that's extremely good position. Okay, we will discuss Sun a little later, but first we'll complete planet by planet. So we are at the moment focused on Mercury. Okay, now if you look at D9, Mercury collaborates with Venus here, and it is also with Gulika. Now Gulika in the Lagna is a kind of a suffering element. It is Shaniputra Gulika. It will kind of throw some kind of doubt, some kind of a let's say intrigue in the whole proceedings. Okay, but more of that later. Now let's look at Mercury in the D10 chart. We are at the moment focused on Mercury, like I said. Now here in the D10, you see Mercury is in the 7th house. And here Mercury, you see there is the aspect of Mars on Mercury. Sun is directly opposite Mercury, and Jupiter is aspecting Mercury directly. So Mercury becomes a very important planet. This is the Lagnesh for Oppenheimer, right? And we will also see later on that Jupiter and Venus are in Revati, exalted, conjunct. Okay, although they just change now, Maush. Okay, but Jupiter and Venus are conjunct within 1 degree of each other in Pisces in Revati, Revati being a Mercury nakshatra. So Mercury is a dispositor of Jupiter and Venus also. So that's a very important point, right? So and if you notice here that that in okay, so that's what. So I'm basically, as far as Mercury is concerned, so this is the analysis of Mercury in his chart. Now let's go to other planets. Now the other important planets we have to look for. Now his 10th house is loaded here. If you see the D1, you see Jupiter and Venus together in Pisces. Venus exalted, obviously. Jupiter in own house within 1 degree. Venus is 19 degrees 1 minute. Jupiter is 20 degrees 3 minutes. So almost within 1 degree of each other. Absolute extreme conjunction. Although what happens is that in D9, they change now Maush. Because if it was before 20 degrees, if Jupiter would have been at even 20 degrees or even 19 degrees, 29 minutes, it would have been in the same now Maush. But they just change now Maush. Jupiter becomes somewhat debilitated here. You see, so his role as a teacher, Jupiter being the teacher in that, so the role of the teacher became somewhat subjugated or somewhat subordinate to his work, in a sense, to his 9th and 8th lord, because you see Jupiter is in Capricorn. Capricorn, the planetary dispositor is Saturn. Saturn is lord of the 9th and the 8th in the D1 chart. Okay, so that's one aspect of Jupiter and Venus here. As I said, Venus is with Mercury, so that's very auspicious. Again in Jupiter's Rashi, which is Sagittarius, and there is the fiery aspect of Mercury here, because we already spoke of Mercury dispositor, Mercury being in Kritika in the last Navamaush, which is incidentally the Pushkar Navamaush, which I did not mention. The last Navamaush of a fiery sign, the 9th Navamaush of Aries would be a Pushkar Navamaush. So Mercury is very powerful actually in a Pushkar Navamaush. Now, if you look at the D10 chart, you find very interesting things with respect to Jupiter and Venus. Jupiter and Venus are together in Taurus. Okay, conjunct. In D10 they are conjunct. Venus is its own house. Jupiter is with Venus. So here Venus, you see, is sort of taking over from Jupiter. It's a slightly more powerful than Jupiter. Even if you notice here, if you see below the Shadbala, Venus is 1.28, Jupiter is 1.2. Okay, so this is somewhat interesting part, right? So this is about Jupiter and Venus. Okay, now we look at some other grahas which are of importance. So now we look at Ketu. Now Ketu is extremely important here, because let me explain to you why. Now Ketu here is in the 10th house in Uttar Bhadrapada. Okay, that's one. Ketu's dispositor, Rashi dispositor in D1 is Jupiter. Okay, so it is with Jupiter in its own house. Ketu is with its own Rashi dispositor in its, in Pisces. Now, if you look at D9 chart, what is happening to Ketu is in the 10th house, and Ketu is with Pluto. So I'm going to come to Pluto a little later. Pluto is also called Yama in Vedic Jyotish. The sign of Pluto from the Western astrological perspective is Scorpio, right? And but Pluto is also called Yama, and Yama is the nakshatra devata of Bharani nakshatra, correct? And you notice where is Mars? Mars is in Bharani, in Aries, right? And Mars is lord of the 6th and the 11th. So therefore, the 6th house is the Upacha house, the 11th house is the Labhasthana. We are not referring to the medical astrological connotations of the 6th house and the 11th house. We are referring to the generic connotation. The 6th house is the Upacha house. It is also a part of the Dhana Trikona. Okay. And Mars is powerful in its own Rashi in Bharani, which is the Venus nakshatra. So Venus again you can see the influence of Venus here, and of course Pluto or Yama here. Yama being the nakshatra devata of Bharani, and that actually means Pluto. So Ketu is with Pluto here. So there is this interesting connection, and it is also in a trine with Venus here. You see, so that's pretty fascinating. In the D9 chart, you also see that the Mars is having a direct aspect on Venus. You see, so the Venus-Mars connection is established in D9, which you can see here in D1 in the form of Mars being in the Venus nakshatra. Okay, so this is as far as Ketu is concerned. Now, if you look at Ketu in the D10 chart, you see that Ketu is in the Upacha house. Okay, here it's in the Upacha house. It is again in Ketu is exalted in Sagittarius. Okay, in the Upacha house. So therefore, it gives enormous work ethic here, and there is a direct opposition here with Saturn. Okay, so on that front, you see that Ketu is a very important graha for Oppenheimer, right? So we've seen that. Now, what else do we want to see? We want to certainly look at the moon very carefully, because see, this man was at one level, because of the Mercury, which was fiery, he had a certain fiery instinct in him. So, he had a certain kind of a anger inside him, because if you remember the apple and the cyanide incident, now whether it really happened or it didn't happen, but it indicates that he had a kind of a instinctual fiery nature, but he never acted upon it. He was questioned repeatedly by when he lost subsequently security clearance. He was questioned by the Atomic Energy Commission committee. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But he never lost his cool. Now, this is because moon is in Punarvasu, actually. So moon is actually Vargottam, because it is in Punarvasu, 4th pada, which is, of course, Cancer Namo. So in the D9, you find that moon is in the 9th house. In the D1, it is in the 2nd house. So he was peaceful to talk. He talked smoothly, clearly, with feeling. He was sensitive to a certain extent. You see the aspect of Jupiter on moon as well. Okay, the Jupiter aspect on moon also sobered him. In D9, moon was, of course, in a very good position. Again, there is a Jupiterian aspect on moon, okay, which sobered him, right? And so, although the sun, which is Yogakarak also for Scorpio Lagna, he's in the 8th house. So we will talk of the sun a little later. Let's complete the moon first. D10 now. D10 is the Dashaunsh chart. Now, in D10, again you see moon is in the 9th house. So, exceptional position of moon in D1, D9, D10. Okay. And here in D10, what we see is that moon has a 3-11 relationship with Mercury and with Jupiter and Venus. So it's in the Labhasthana from Jupiter and Venus, and Mercury is in the Labhasthana from moon, in that sense. So these are harmonious relationships. Also, it is in Navam Pancham Yoga, or trinal relationship with sun. Okay, so that's a very balanced kind of a thing here. So here the D1, D10 chart shows that he was always a great team man. He never lost his cool. He was compassionate with his team members to a great extent. He collaborated well. The emotional mind collaborated well with the rational mind. with the moon Mercury dynamic, as you can see. And his domestic issues did affect his career a bit, because you can see that Mars is actually aspecting Jupiter and Venus through its 8th aspect. Okay, so that's something to look for, right? So this is about the moon part. Now I want to talk about the sun. Sun is important, obviously, because now sun here is the third lord, okay, in the D1 chart. So it is exalted. Sun is exalted in Ashwini, that too. It is actually at its maximum exaltation point, because sun maximum exaltation point is in Aries at 10 degrees. And here it is at 9 degrees 27 minutes. So it's in Ashwini. So it's extremely good position of the sun from the D1 perspective. So that means the courage than, the Parakrama Lord, is exalted. So he had enormous courage, okay, to pursue his ideas. And in fact, you see, sun is collaborating with Mars also. It's kind of conjunct in a sense, or it's in the same house. Separation is about 10 degrees. So that's one. Now the sun also represents his younger sibling, right? So you can find that his younger sibling also was very was like a revolutionary kind of a thought process. He was with the Communist Party, as we know. Now what happened is, what happens to the sun in the D9? Let's look at that. Sun goes in the 8th house. Now what does this indicate to me? What it indicates is that the sun was also a source of problems for him, because his brother was a source of problems for him. The earliest association of his brother with the Communist Party actually became a sore issue for Oppenheimer later, when he was being questioned, when he fell from grace, as it were. So therefore, sun is with Uranus again. So sun is a mixed kind of a blessings for him in the chart. Although it is exalted technically, it also indicates that he came from a very wealthy New York family. His father was an extremely wealthy person, wealthy family. So this indicates he was extremely well heeled. He had a very rich childhood. As we know, he studied his undergraduation from Harvard. He subsequently went to Cambridge. And then, of course, after that, he went to Göttingen to study with Max Born. Okay. Now, if you look at the sun in the D10 chart, sun is in the Lagna. So in his work, he was in leadership position always. He was privileged. There was nobody else like Oppenheimer. I mean, Colonel Groves selected him because there was no other option for the US government. He was the best person for the job, right? So you can see the sun, but the sun, in its true nature in D9, we realize that it is in the 8th house, so it created problems for him, right? So that's one. Now, what else do we want to look at? Let's look at some very important things, some very important planets. Okay, but before that, I think we'll stop this share and we'll go back to the PPT, right? So you can see, right? You can see the chart. Now, I'm just repeating. I'm now going to go over what we just summarized. So, like I said, Mercury is in Aries in Pushkar. Okay, so I have just written down here what I have discussed right now. Okay. Mercury has a 6-8 relationship with the moon in D9. So you always find a bit of this, dichotomy. But then in the D10 chart, you find that he has kind of resolved that issue between the emotional mind and rational mind, and he can function well, right? We also spoke about moon. Moon becomes the perfect collaborator and a leader in D10. We spoke about Jupiter and Venus. We spoke about Ketu. And now we will speak about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They are in very dangerous positions here. And I will again share you the Kundali. Okay. Now, I think no study of Oppenheimer can be complete without the outermost planets, because his work impacted humanity at large. It impacted the entire sociological, culture of Japan, for example, after the war. So it had huge impact uh, on how we look at war, how we look at peace. So therefore, we have to look at the outer planets. Now, when we look at the outer planets here, let's start with D1. You see that there is Neptune in the Lagna. Neptune is also Varun of Vedic astrology. Now, Neptune in the Lagna, Varun. So Varun is the overlord. Okay, Varun is the overlord in the Rig Veda. Varun is the Thanos, as it were. So this is the kind of a thought process which can give rise to the what is said, that now I am become death, destroyer of worlds. So that kind of a thing comes from the position of Neptune here in Ardra, that too. And Neptune is in deep turmoil with Gulika, because Gulika here is Shaniputra Gulika. Gulika is the kind of thought process which made him say to President Truman when he met him that I have blood on my hands. So that blood on my hands, that anguish, that intense suffering, that intense anguish comes from Gulika in the Lagna, and that Gulika is so close to Neptune. So it's almost like a study in contradictions. But that's how it was. Now, Uranus is in the 7th house in Mool Nakshatra, in a fiery sign of Sagittarius, in the nakshatra of Ketu. Okay, so need I say more? Then, if you look at the Pluto is in the 12th house, in the house of DK Vyayasthana in Mruga Nakshatra. Okay, so it is in the nakshatra of Mars. Okay, now if you look at D9, in D9 you see that Uranus is in the 8th house and Neptune is in the 3rd house. So Neptune and Uranus are both in the houses of death in a way, right? That's very suggestive. I mean, because this is D9 and Ketu is with Pluto. So his work was concerning explosive nuclear energy. Pluto stands for, Pluto is actually also nuclear energy. It is death. It's it's Yama. So Pluto is Yama. Pluto is the same as, as the god of death, okay, in ancient mythology. Now, if you look at D10, again you find that Uranus and Pluto are in, Neptune, Pluto are both now in the 3rd house, and Uranus is in the 8th house. So you see this fascination with death. The outermost planets are actually in these, reflected in his chart in the D10. So it is no coincidence that nature or God or humanity selected Oppenheimer to be the purveyor, the final designer, if I may say so, of the atom bomb. Okay, so you see these things reflected here very much. Let's go back to the PPT now. So here, typically now, so I already discussed what, the Uranus part and Neptune and Pluto. Now, I want to again go over some of these things. The deep suffering and anguish comes from Gulika, Shaniputra in D1 in Ardra. Okay. Now, Ardra, the nakshatra deity of Ardra is Rudra, remember, the destroyer. Okay. So that's very important signification here, because the nakshatra devatas are actually the doers, the true masters of the act, the hidden powerful perpetrators who are not visible because they act through the grahas and the rashis. And the second thing is, he says, now I am become death, destroyer of worlds. So there is a sense of power also. There is a sense of being Kala, being Rudra. actually. And certainly no wonder that again the nakshatra is Ardra. In fact, there is a separation of only 2 degrees between Gulika and Neptune here. So this is actually in essence Oppenheimer. Okay, you will note that Varuna, as I said earlier, is the absolute Vedic overlord. And in the Rig Veda, the first 10 sutras of the Rig Veda are actually dedicated to Varuna. And then gradually you find that Indra takes over, and then Indra finds Indra is legion then in the Rig Veda, particularly after he kills Vritra. Okay, along with the help of Saraswati Devi, if you know. Right? So thank you so much for watching. And if you like this, I might do another video on Oppenheimer, which is focusing on the Manhattan Project and also focusing on his fall from grace. Okay, so but just let me know how you like this. Please comment on the video. If you like the video, please share it and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much and see you soon. Bye.